What makes people risk everything for a single line in the record books? In the fall of 2023, tragedy struck on the slopes of Shishapangma, and the entire mountaineering world was left asking that very question. Two women were chasing their dream and instead walked into a nightmare. An American and a German climber shared the same goal: to become the first in their countries to conquer all 14 8,000ers. Friendship, rivalry, ambition, it all mixed into a deadly cocktail high above 8,000 meters. But where did it all go wrong? Today we'll retrace every moment of that fateful expedition. We'll see what choices led to disaster, and we'll try to answer the hardest question of all: are records ever worth more than human lives? Your comments and support keep this channel going. Thank you for being here. There are mountains so famous that even people far from the climbing world know their names: Everest, K2, Annapurna. And then there is Shishapangma, the quiet, almost forgotten sister of these giants, the 14th highest peak on Earth, standing at just over 8,000 meters beneath the pure Tibetan sky. The Chinese first reached its summit back in 1964, and ever since, it has seemed to slumber on the sidelines of mountaineering's greatest battles. But don't be fooled into thinking Shishapangma is harmless. Over the past half-century, it has claimed 21 lives. That may sound modest compared to Everest, but here's the catch. China rarely grants permits to climb it, so the mountain stays nearly empty. The routes are indeed easier than on K2, and that very appearance of simplicity creates a dangerous illusion of safety. When climbers rarely set foot on a peak, every tragedy hits harder. There's no steady stream of statistics, no finely tuned rescue protocols, only the silence of snow-covered slopes and the false sense that nothing bad could ever happen here. It was that deceptive calm that set the stage for the events of October 2023. To understand what unfolded on Shishapangma, we need to look into the very heart of modern mountaineering, the fever of records. It all began in the 1980s, when the legendary Reinhold Messner climbed all 14 8,000ers without bottled oxygen. For mountaineering, it was like landing on the moon. It felt like there was nowhere left to go. But human ambition knows no limits. If you can't climb higher, you climb faster. If you can't climb faster, you make it more spectacular. And if not more spectacular, then at any cost. Decades later, new kinds of races emerged. Who could climb all 14 peaks the fastest? Who could do it with the least support? Or, on the other extreme, who could do it with the biggest spectacle? Helicopters, armies of porters, and Hollywood film crews in tow. Social media turned mountaineering into a show. It was no longer enough just to stand on a summit. You had to rack up millions of views, go viral, and carve your name into history, not only as a climber, but as a brand. The more hype, the more money. And the more money, the greater the temptation to gamble it all. In 2023, Norwegian climber Kristen Harila shook the mountaineering world with an unbelievable record: 14 8,000ers in just 92 days. Imagine that. In only 3 months, she accomplished what takes others years. But her triumph quickly turned into scandal. Critics accused her of using helicopters where others walked, of aggressive self-promotion that turned every step into social media content. And most disturbing of all, a video surfaced online showing one of her Sherpas falling during a filming session. Suddenly, the question hung heavy in the air. Had mountaineering become nothing more than gladiator fights played out 8,000 meters above sea level? Against this backdrop of record chasing and public controversy, dozens of climbers set out for Shishapangma on October 7, 2023. A rare weather window had opened, an opportunity that comes only once a season, sometimes even less. A crowd hungry for records gathered at the foot of the mountain. The atmosphere felt more like the start of a marathon, except here the stakes were measured in human lives. Everyone knew whoever reached the summit first would etch their name into history. Among the crowd, 2 women stand out: American climber Julia Rains and German climber Sophia Becker. Both are seasoned mountaineers, both standing on the edge of the greatest achievement of their careers. Julia dreams of becoming the first American woman to climb all 14 8,000ers. Sophia is chasing the same goal for Germany. On the surface, their aim is the same, but each wants to be the very first in her country. That subtle detail turns the climb into a quiet rivalry. At their side are experienced Sherpas, men who have spent years guiding Western clients across the most dangerous peaks on Earth. But what's going on in their minds? Outwardly, they smile, hug, and wish each other good luck. a typical pre-climb atmosphere. Yet behind that friendly mask, the tension is very real. Everyone knows there isn't enough space in the history books for both of them. Only one can be first. And when years of preparation, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the dream of a lifetime are on the line, friendship becomes fragile, like a glass vase perched on the edge of a table. One wrong move, and it shatters. The morning of October 7th greets the climbers with far from perfect conditions. For days, light but steady snowfall has been building up on Shishapangma's steep slopes. By dawn, the wind begins to rise, and the experienced among them know what that means. A classic recipe for avalanches. Fresh snow piled on older layers, wind adding extra pressure, all the warning signs are there. But the weather window may not open again for months, and everyone knows it. An Italian team in base camp openly warns the others. The slopes are unstable. Going up now is like playing Russian roulette with snow. The Italians know the mountains, and their words should be taken seriously. But the crowd chasing records seems deaf to reason. Everyone is thinking the same thing. Maybe we'll be lucky, maybe today will be fine. After all, everyone else is going too. Crowd psychology works against common sense. If everyone does something dangerous, it somehow feels less dangerous. And so, they climb. Dozens of figures in bright mountaineering gear, inching up the white slope like colorful ants. Every step feels brutal at this altitude, where oxygen is painfully scarce. But adrenaline is stronger than fear. Julia follows her chosen line, Sophia hers. On the surface, it looks like friendly rivalry, but in truth, each is watching the other closely. Who's higher? Who's faster? Who's closer to that dream? At 7,800 meters, the mountain decides to remind them who's really in charge. The first strike comes suddenly, as avalanches always do. Imagine this. You're moving step by step, focused on your breathing, on staying upright in the thin air. Then the world around you shifts. The snow beneath your boots cracks, and you know instantly. It's begun, the thing every climber dreads. The avalanche slams into Julia Rains and her Sherpa, Pemba, at 7,800 meters. A white wall thunders down with the roar of a freight train. And in that chaos, two lives vanish, as if they had never been there. A little higher up, the rest of the team sees it all unfold with their own eyes. They witness the nightmare every climber keeps buried in the darkest corners of their mind, a second, maybe two, and their teammates are gone, swallowed by a sea of white. Logic says the only choice is to turn back immediately. The first avalanche is a warning, proof that conditions are critical. But human psychology doesn't always follow logic. They've invested too much, come too far, and are standing so close to their goal. Maybe it was just bad luck. Maybe higher up it will be safer. The choice to keep going after the first avalanche seals the fate of the expedition. In that moment, they stand at a fork in the road, between life and ambition. On one side is safety, retreat, the chance to try again another day. On the other side is the record, the glory, the dream of a lifetime, and they choose the record. Perhaps they believe the worst has already happened. Perhaps they cling to the hope that Julia and Pemba survived and could be rescued on the way down. Or perhaps they simply can't bring themselves to stop when the summit feels so close. An hour passes, just an hour, the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee or scroll through the news. But in the mountains, an hour can change everything. The snow breaks loose again, and this time it takes Sophia Becker and her Sherpa, Tenji. The second avalanche strikes just as suddenly as the first, but now it isn't a warning, it's a sentence. Another two lives vanish into the white abyss, and at last the climbers understand. The mountain isn't in the mood to negotiate today. The survivors are left trying to decide what to do next, but the moment for the right choice has already slipped away. When an avalanche takes people, you have maybe 30 minutes to search. After that, the odds of finding anyone alive fall to almost nothing. But at 7,800 meters in thin air, and after hours of exhausting climbing, they are physically incapable of mounting a real rescue. The terrible truth sets in, it's too late. Sophia and Tenji are gone, swallowed by the same white abyss that claimed Julia and Pemba an hour earlier. And now come the questions that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Why didn't the guide turn the group around after the first avalanche? It was obvious. If the snow broke once, it could break again. Every mountaineering handbook says the same thing. The first avalanche is a red light, a signal to descend immediately. Yet something drove the expedition leader to make the fatal call to keep climbing. Was it the lure of the record clouding his judgment, or the pressure from clients who had paid a fortune and refused to hear the word failure? Or maybe it was just simple human faith in the idea that it won't happen to us. That same psychological trap even seasoned professionals fall into, the illusion of control over forces of nature that cannot be controlled. Up to that moment, things hadn't seemed so bad. The conditions weren't ideal, but they had seen worse. Yes, the Italians had warned them, but Italians are always cautious, right? That false confidence cost 4 people their lives. And the worst part, the survivors are still tormented by these questions. Every night, they find themselves reliving that moment, whispering the same thought. What if we had turned back? But even in this hell, there is room for heroism. A Sherpa named Ngima makes a choice some will call madness, and others will call a miracle. He throws himself into the avalanche zone to search for survivors. Picture this: a man at nearly 8,000 meters, where every breath burns, where the body is already at its limit, descending straight into the heart of danger to try to save his companions. Without bottled oxygen, relying only on his willpower and the hard-earned instincts of generations of mountain people, he begins his desperate search. And unbelievably, he manages to pull one climber out alive from beneath the snow. That alone is a miracle. People buried by an avalanche almost never survive more than half an hour, but sometimes the mountains offer hope in the most hopeless moments. Ngima literally drags a man back from death's grasp, but his own fight for life is only beginning. While trying to lift the survivor upward, Ngima slips and plunges down a wall 150 meters high, the height of a 50-story building. His body tumbles across the frozen slope, gathering speed, bouncing off rocks, and everyone who sees it knows, no one survives a fall like that. 150 meters down, a steep face studded with ice and stone, it's as close to certain death as it gets. His body hurtles toward a rock ledge, and it seems the tragedy is about to end once and for all. But at the very last instant, he shoots past it, as if the mountain itself decides to spare him one more chance. When his body finally comes to rest, everyone is sure they have just witnessed the death of a hero. But the mountains are full of surprises, and not all of them are fatal. One of Ngima's companions finds his motionless body in the snow and begins resuscitation right there on the slope of an 8,000er. Picture the scene. At an altitude where even breathing is torture, where every movement feels impossible, one man is trying to bring another back to life. Chest compressions, mouth to mouth, the things entire hospital teams perform are now in the hands of a single exhausted climber. And then, a miracle. After a few desperate breaths, Ngima opens his eyes. He comes back to life right there in the snow, on the edge of the world, where the air is thin and the cold itself is lethal. Doctors would later confirm he had a fractured skull and a broken tailbone, injuries that usually leave people bedridden for months. But Ngima didn't stay down. With broken bones, a concussion, and wounds that could have killed anyone else, he managed to descend to base camp on his own. Just 24 hours after falling from a 150-meter wall, Ngima was already sitting on a bus bound for Kathmandu, a living ghost with a fractured skull who had survived the kind of fall no one should. The passengers riding with him had no idea that next to them sat a man who had, quite literally, returned from the dead the day before on one of the world's most dangerous mountains. His story would become legend among Sherpas, a testament to how far a person can go in the fight to save another. But amid all the stories of miraculous rescues and impossible survival, there's a sad truth no act of heroism can undo. Julia Rains and Sophia Becker remain on the slopes of Shishapangma forever. Two strong, gifted women who devoted their lives to the world's highest peaks are now part of the mountain itself. Their bodies lie somewhere beneath the snow, nearly 8,000 meters up, in the place climbers call the Death Zone. Along with them are two Sherpas, Pemba and Tenji, whose names the Western press mentioned only in passing, though they deserve equal remembrance. The tragedy on Shishapangma revealed more than just the dangers of high-altitude climbing. It also pulled back the curtain on the hidden rivalries and unspoken tensions that had been building within the mountaineering world for years. Julia and Sophia's friendship wasn't as seamless as it looked from the outside. Behind the smiles and photos was a rivalry that grew sharper with every summit they climbed. When glory, sponsorships, and a place in history are on the line, even close friends can turn into competitors. In the aftermath, details of this rivalry began to surface. Those close to the two women spoke of how allies gradually became adversaries. Each of them wanted more than just a place on the list of climbers who had completed all 14 8,000ers. Each wanted to be the first from her country to do it. An American against a German, one sponsor's budget against another, West versus Central Europe. What started as healthy competition slowly hardened into a race where the winner would take it all, and the loser would be left in the shadows. One of Sophia's close friends later told reporters just how toxic the rivalry had become in the months before the fatal climb. Every social media post was scrutinized and compared. Every achievement by one was taken as a challenge by the other. Their circles only fueled the tension, constantly asking, who will finish first? Who's stronger? Who has the better chance? What should have been a celebration of human endurance turned into a psychological war of attrition. And this was the outcome of that race. Not a record, but a tragedy. Not a triumphant finish, but two bodies buried beneath the snow of a Tibetan mountain. Neither Julia nor Sophia became the first in her country. Their dreams remain unfulfilled, their rivalry frozen forever in the snows of Shishapangma. The bitter truth is that both women were strong enough, experienced enough to reach their goals. But the chase for the title of first pushed them into choices they might never have made under other circumstances. The tragedy on Shishapangma leaves behind harsh but necessary lessons about the nature of modern mountaineering. The first lesson: the death zone is no place for ego or rivalry. Above 8,000 meters, a different set of rules applies, rules where human pride must yield to the instinct to survive. The mountains don't care about your records, your fame, or your follower count. They don't care whether you are the first or the 10th. They measure only one thing: whether you respect their power or believe yourself stronger than nature. The second lesson cuts even deeper. Records mean nothing if you end up buried in the snow. Titles, honors, entries in record books, what are they worth compared to a human life? Julia and Sophia could have gone on living, climbing new peaks, inspiring the next generation of mountaineers. Instead, their names are tied forever, not to triumph, but to tragedy. And the saddest part is that their deaths didn't stop the race for records. They only added another chapter to the long list of lives lost to human ambition. The third, and perhaps most important, lesson is this: two Sherpas paid with their lives for someone else's dreams. Pemba and Tenji weren't chasing records. They weren't hoping for fame in Western media or sponsorship deals. They were simply doing their jobs, helping clients pursue their ambitions. And they died not for their own dreams, but for the dreams of others. That raises uncomfortable questions about the ethics of using local guides to chase personal glory, especially when the stakes are life and death. The world's response to the Shishapangma tragedy was swift and severe. China, already reluctant to grant climbing permits, immediately closed the mountain altogether. No explanations, no timeline, just a curtain falling over the world's 14th highest peak. The authorities made it clear they had no interest in more tragedies or in explaining to families why their loved ones never came home. Online, fierce debates broke out. Are records ever worth such a price? Is a place in the Guinness Book worth a human life? Debates grew especially heated around the role of Sherpas in modern mountaineering. For the first time, many began to argue that local guides should have the right to say no to a client, even if that client has paid a fortune. After all, Sherpas know their mountains better than anyone, and they can sense danger on an instinctive level. But economic dependence forces them to take risks for Western ambitions. Pemba and Tenji might still be alive today if they had had the power to stop a doomed climb. And then came the most cynical twist. Just weeks after the tragedy, Norwegian record holder Kristin Harila, the same climber whose achievements had already been mired in controversy, announced she was willing to climb Shishapangma to retrieve one of the bodies. On the surface it sounded noble, but the public largely saw it as a publicity stunt rather than genuine compassion. On 8,000ers, bodies almost always remain where they fall. It's a brutal but accepted reality. Suddenly a self-declared heroine appeared, ready to take on a rescue for the cameras. Which brings us to the final lesson of this story. Shishapangma reminded the climbing world of a simple truth we've forgotten. The mountains are not about records, but about life and death. 4 people didn't die because they were bad climbers. They died because, in the critical moment, ambition outweighed reason. Thank you for staying with me until the end, and for supporting the channel with your comments and likes. Your engagement makes these deep dives possible. And now, one last question to leave you with. Imagine yourself in that expedition, standing there after the first avalanche. Ahead lies the dream of a lifetime, years of preparation, and a fortune already spent. But the danger is obvious. Would you risk everything for a title, or turn back? Thanks again for being here. Share your thoughts in the comments, and support the channel with a like and a subscription so you don't miss the next story.